Does Genesis 2 present a definition of marriage in the Bible? This is an argument that you will see all over the place. However, it is, unsurprisingly, not a really satisfactory argument if you're reading Genesis 2:24, the verse that everyone turns to, in the context of the larger Hebrew Bible, or even just in the context of Genesis 2. So the verse in question is this verse, Genesis 2:24. Therefore a man leaves his father and his mother and clings to his wife, and they become one flesh. This gets leveraged as a definition of marriage in Genesis 2 that shows up in other texts. You could see in 2:24, yes, an etiology for the idea of marriages. What we get in the creation accounts of Genesis 1 and 2 is a series of explanations, etiologies for how things came to be. And so Genesis 2:24, yes, does slot in and play a role there. However, we should also read it in the context of what it's describing in Genesis 2. Let's look back at 2:18. Then the Lord God said, "It's not good that a man should be alone. I will make him a helper as his partner." To which you're saying, yeah, okay. And then we go to 24 and there you have the partner. Skipping over, however, what comes in between, because in verses 19, we get that the Lord formed every animal of the field and every bird of the air and brought them to the man to see what he would call them. Man gave names to all cattle and to birds of the air and to every animal of the field. But for the man, there was not found a helper as his partner. Out of these animals, right, we have that naming parade. They're all brought forward just to be named, not in the context of 2:20, because we get that line, but for the man, there was not a helper found. So there was a parade here with the intention of God says it's not good he's alone, make the animals, bring them to the man. Does he identify someone as a partner within these? No. And then we go to the rib and the creation of woman, to which the man says, this is bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. However, taking that model of 2:24 and saying, well, this is a definition of marriage, in the context of Genesis 2, you also have to leave open the possibility that the man could have chosen one of those other created beings that God made and brought before the man to say, is one of these a partner for you? So do you want to use 2:24 to look at that and say that would have been a biblical definition of marriage if Adam had looked at one of those birds of the air or animals of the ground and said, this is bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh? So no, Genesis 2:24 is not a one-size-fits-all definition of marriage, not in the context of all the Hebrew Bible, and not even just in Genesis 2.